So this is your show. I'm gonna let you lead it. I'm
Yeah,
gonna let you.
yeah. I'm driving. Your color commentary, so you occasionally have to go ah,
I'll
like
scream
the
and I'll
king,
talk
yeah.
about puppies
Puppy.
and yeah, sure.
So I'm gonna impress you with my host skills. Are you ready for that?
I cannot wait.
I thought of the perfect intro for what this show is about.
I cannot wait to hear it.
Okay, so here goes. So Vic, you got video games. You play them,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you can make movies about them. But
True.
did you know that you could make a podcast about them?
What?
And so that's what we're gonna do here on Video Games the Podcast. So a lot of people are probably wondering what that is, because it's probably popping up. I think it's gonna pop up in the Virtual Theater podcast feed, because the reason being is this is going to be a very infrequent and kind of informal podcast between me, Gooey Fame, and my buddy Vic. Hey Vic.
This is Igu. This is just like some bonus content.
This is bonus, and you know, Virtual Theater, we have a Patreon, and this isn't even on that. This is how bonus it is. It's free. We're just giving this away.
Free bonus content. Wow.
Because like we said, this is a podcast. I'm sure you're familiar with that. But for us, for you and me, it's just kind of we're treating this as sort of a book club, but for video games. So we're going to be playing some just classic games, and whenever we get done with them, however long it takes, it could be it's taken months to get this one together.
Months at this point.
Yeah, I finished this in the summer, actually, in like June. But it's just kind of an excuse for us to like sit down and talk about stuff.
Gotta be honest, you recommended this game as one of the best games of all time.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh yeah, cool. And you threw the idea of the podcast out to me, which, quick side note, I love the idea of someone stumbling across this
somehow
this audio file and being like, what's a podcast? I've never heard of a podcast
Well, just
before.
in case it's like on in public somewhere, you know? Like
Listen to podcasts aloud with no headphones in public?
I've seen. Okay, well, here's a podcast story. I've worked in, like, you know, kitchens before, and you know, sometimes you listen to music, sometimes someone will throw on a podcast.
That's a very, very bold move.
It is.
I can't think of a single situation where I would be near coworkers and I would say, hey, people who I only kind of sort of know, let's listen to this very long conversation between two strangers about something very niche.
It's like
that's a bold move.
You gotta know the vibe, you know, and I think it's been successfully done before, for sure. So just in case you're in a pizza kitchen somewhere and your coworker put on this weird podcast, now you know that it's about video games. You can do a podcast about video games. This is the first one, so
the first one ever.
Yeah. Anyway, what was I saying? Oh yeah, this is.
Oh, we
It's also just you know, two people talking, because that's also what podcasts are. People complain about there's too many podcasts in the world, but I actually think there could be an infinite amount of podcasts, because that's just the world we live in today. We've got these recording tools, and you might as well just use them to talk to your friends.
There are billions of people on the planet, and why shouldn't each and every one of them record into a microphone whenever they feel like it?
Yeah.
That's your right as a human being, as a citizen of the world.
So that's like a background on us too, because you and I we've done that. We're veterans of this at this point.
You could say we're seasoned.
We're both.
We've got a little bit of gristle in our cast iron skillet. You could say that.
So we know each other through music initially, but then wrestling, because we did our wrestling podcast, which was, I think, the first wrestling podcast, and because it had such a definitive name too. Pro Wrestling Required Viewing. We kind of presented all of the things that were required viewing. Nothing was not, obviously.
Wasn't anything else left to talk about? We covered all of the wrestling. Yeah, so we had to hang it up.
Yeah, wrestling, it ended, and it is back now, but I think, someone else has to kind of pick up the mantle.
We're retired. Our jerseys are hanging in the rafters. It's time for some new freshman to take over.
Yeah, but yeah, we've had a good connection on games too, which has been fun. We played some Minecraft, and it was good to hang out again. That was like almost like the transitional period of podcasts for us.
Okay, so that brings me to number one. I was saying, so you recommended this episode's game, Castlevania Symphony of the Night, like in May maybe or June.
Yeah,
and you're like, hey, we should. You pitched it to me, and I was like, yes, hell yeah, that sounds great. And then I just didn't play the game at all. Like, you recommended it to me, and you're like, oh, it's gonna be great. I heard great things about this game, and then I just nothing about it.
You didn't take it seriously.
I mean, I was just like, you know what, I'll get to it. But before we get into the actual game, I guess that's maybe a good question, because it's been COVID for the last 18 months.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know about you, I have played maybe more video games in my entire adult life in the last 18 months than I have the other 13 or 14 years.
I've definitely had moments like that. See, with me, I'm always playing stuff because I'm always making videos for Zelda Dungeon. Now I have my own YouTube series as well, which maybe I'll put this on there too. How about that?
Ooh.
But that's I'm usually always playing like Zelda games, and then like every once in a while I'll get like sucked into a different game. But I have this need almost when I have like free time to like schedule something to do. You know what I mean? To like give myself a project or something, and now that after all these years of like figuring out how to do podcasts and stuff like that, it's like, oh, make a podcast about it. I'm sure there's a lot of people who have that brain now, and so I think it was in May or something where I was just like, oh yeah, I just want to play something classic, and I almost felt like, oh, maybe I'll, just not necessarily start a podcast, but like, it was more an idea of like, I'll reach out to Vic and, maybe we can play this game together, and we'll, just be able to talk about it. Cause that's always a good feeling too, is when you like, are playing something and everyone's talking about it. And that usually happens a lot with new games, but you don't get it as much if you go back and play Symphony of the Night. Sure, it's a classic, but like not everyone is just like thinking about it at that moment,
Not a ton of discourse, not a ton of content coming out regarding Castlevania Symphony of the Night in 2021, for sure.
But you've been gaming hard though, like you said.
I mean, so I know you and I are kind of like on opposite sides of the coin. In my day-to-day life, I don't talk about video games that much. My wife and friend of the show, Amanda, also plays video games. She's playing, I think, The Sims 4 right now as we speak. So I'll talk with her. And occasionally I'll talk with my students. But there's not a ton of... I maybe have a couple other friends aside from you that I talk about video games with a little. But a lot of my friends don't like video games. Or at work, I'm just like surrounded by people who, for the most part, they're adults. They don't play video games. And I think you have maybe a few more people in your corner that are talking about video games most of the day.
Yeah, for sure. But it's usually very focused on Zelda and even more so Nintendo, which is actually, maybe throw that in there a little bit, is like another kind of reason for, I was like, I want to hit some classics. One is because there's usually, a lot of them are pretty easy to come across now. Well, not like classic ones are, not like rare old games, but also like I have some blind spots of like gaming that I've like only briefly dipped into, and I've owned a couple like non-Nintendo consoles in my life. I had a PS2, PS4, I had a 360, but like for the most part, my major touchstones are like Nintendo games, and so partially wanted to like, not every game we do is gonna not be a Nintendo game because they made many classics, obviously. But I wanted to kind of touch on, other like a lot of the PS1 is kind of stuff I only played a little bit at my cousin's. You know what I mean? Like I just saw glimpses of these games and was like, whoa. I don't know what what's your history with games like.
We had like a variety of consoles when I was like a kid. We had like just Nintendo stuff, regular Nintendo, the Super Nintendo, Nintendo 64. At some point, we got like a PS2, and then I remember there was a Kmart that had PS1s on sale. But for the most part, it was like Nintendo, and then like when we got the PS2, then we were like solidly a PlayStation house.
Okay, right on.
So I never had like a Sega Genesis. I never had like a Dreamcast or a Sega Saturn. And I didn't play a lot of PS1 games. So we have a few others on the list that I would love to talk about someday. I am about 60 hours into Final Fantasy Tactics.
Yes. Okay.
So like stuff like that. But I had never, other than seeing people talk about this game, I had never touched it until you were like, "Hey, you want to play this game?"
Yes. So hopefully we're going to do some of that, but also we'll revisit some games that we've either one of us have played or both of us played. It doesn't matter. I think the only criteria we've established is that it's like ones. I think I made this reference to you, but we're trying to do like the Moby Dicks of video games, just those like time-honored classics, so ones that are at least like 10 years old and kind of in the canon,
I think you nailed it on the head with the book club idea. My mom and my aunts literally just Google every time they get together, like, best books of all time, and then they just kind of like go down that list until they find one that collectively none of them have read, and then they read that book, whatever it is.
Yeah, and some people might think that's basic, but I think that's also a great way to do it because you're just becoming more culturally literate, right?
If I haven't played it, it's new to me.
So yeah, that's that's what we're gonna do here, pretty much. So we might as well get into it, I guess, right?
Let's get into it.
Okay, so like I said, I'm sure everyone can tell by now, but we are talking about the game Castlevania Symphony of the Night, which was published by Konami, originally for the Sony PlayStation in 1997. Do you have any like history with the Castlevania series at all?
I played Super Castlevania on like the SNES classic that came out. And I have watched a couple internet videos about like Castlevania 2 Simon's Quest. Is that what it's called?
Yes.
Yep. I always thought there's like that weird moment in that game where like you have to stand in a certain spot for a weird period of time and then like a tornado appears. And I always thought that was neat. I'm just like, wow, what a weird cryptic thing. But other than playing Super Castlevania, I never played any other Castlevania games.
Okay, cool. Yeah, my first console was the NES, and I did have those on there, but I was very young. But I did like those, particularly, I think the third one I played a lot, and I remember the first one. And I have like memories of that game, and like the look is very cool, and the music kind of ingrained in my head. But after I played this, I went back and got that the collection of like all the NES, Super Nintendo, Game Boy games, and I tried all of them out, and I beat a few, but like, it's funny thinking about playing those as like a 4-year-old or whatever, because like I got up, for example, to like the first boss in the first Castlevania, and like I was like, I definitely did not get past here. You know what I mean? But where it's like it was like tricky, but I got it as an adult, but there's like no way. But I guess that was a lot of like 4-year-old video game playing, was just like walking around and like dying on the first level.
Yeah, I had the very first Metroid on Nintendo, and I had
Oh
no
God,
fucking
yeah,
clue what to do. I
yep,
would just sort of like walk to the left as far as I could, and then I remember walking to the right and like maybe falling down and then dying. She's like, "Well, that's it. That's as far as I'm ever gonna get in this game." And I haven't played it since then. As a child, forget about it. My
yeah.
child brain was never gonna comprehend what to do.
So I've always wanted to get into the series, especially after. Well, I watched the Netflix show and I really enjoyed it, and it's a lot of that, um, a lot of that things are taken from the game and put into this game specifically and put into it, and a lot of people saying it's one of the greatest games of all time. It was like, okay, this is going to the top of my list. I kind of had like the itch to play it, when you see something and you kind of like see a movie or something and you're like want to know more about it.
You had the itch for this.
Yes. Have you played a lot of other games like this? I mean, we'll talk about, it kind of spawned like a legacy of like a genre almost. Were you kind of was this like familiar to you?
Talking about the genre of video games known as Metroidvanias.
Yes.
Man, I think yeah. I'm trying to think of like more recently. I played Guacamelee a while ago. Did you ever play that game?
I have not played it. No. It looks fun though.
Uh, so that's like the perfect Venn diagram cross of the old podcast and the new podcast because you're playing as a luchador, but it is very much a
Whoa.
Metroidvania game, where you're opening up the grid map and you get new abilities along the way. I did also was it during COVID times? I beat Super Metroid, which is like now one of my favorite games. Like I love Super Metroid. I love
Right
the
on.
atmosphere. I love the graphics. Um, and so you could immediately see, okay, this Castlevania game because the other Castlevania games, not really like this, right?
No,
Um,
so that's actually, I guess we can, the games in that collection that I was talking about up until this point were all linear, for the most part, levels, like just an action, linear action platformer almost game. And then this game introduced like this whole non-linear world and everything, not levels, but this whole world.
right. Which is like open world before open world because you could basically go anywhere to an extent and sort of do anything. Like there's nothing that says you have to go this way or that way. You kind of just
Yes,
like
yeah.
start moving, which is like so fun. It was very satisfying to just be like, all right, I'm just gonna walk in this direction and see what happens. Um,
So you definitely you've played games similar to this. So it was probably kind of interesting to see like where a lot of it probably was inspired by.
I was actually thinking about the other day. I was thinking about like the term Metroidvania and how like it's kind of weird that Castlevania gets half of the title of this genre because most Castlevania games are not like this. And then I was like, oh okay. So when we say Metroidvania, we're really talking about just kind of this Castlevania,
Hmm.
and then those first Metroid games.
Well, no, there's a more specific reason for it actually.
Oh, please hit me with it.
So, after this, there was a run of games on the Game Boy Advance that were highly inspired by this, that are, trying to kind of recapture this. And yeah.
Ah,
While as on consoles, like on Nintendo 64 and stuff like that, they tried to go in some like more 3D game directions. But a lot of the games on Game Boy Advance, there's some where they had the same designer and stuff like that, and they were of this ilk. And the term was
ah.
actually originally created online on like forums, and it was between people who were trying to distinguish between, I think they were saying classic Vanias and then like this new style that is more similar to Metroid.
Look at you doing the research on this.
I've put my researcher cap on.
There's classic Vanias, and then there's Metroidvanias.
Yes, and then 10 years later, there's people inspired by these games, and they start making more like it, and now you got a genre popping up. Now you got a genre going.
That's after playing this, I was like, okay. There have been a couple games on my list: Hollow Knight, The Messenger, a couple other games. I'm like, okay, I need to like start playing these games because this game was so fun.
Yes, well, and I will say I told you about it already, but that Game Boy Advance collection of Castlevania games on the Switch is a lot of fun. The first one on it is a little weird, but the other two are, I think they nailed it a little bit more.
Okay.
But yeah, for me, I didn't play Super Metroid before this because I honestly feel like I've not played it, but I feel like it deserves its own like kind of episode, and I didn't want to like lump it in or anything, so I kind of avoided it. Though I am playing the new one, but other than that, I hadn't played a lot of. What's that?
Metroid Dread. You're playing Metroid Dread.
Yes, Metroid Dread. I have been playing that, and it's a lot of fun. But I was trying to avoid, bringing Metroid into this. But otherwise, I hadn't played a lot of Metroidvania style games before coming to this, which is kind of weird because I love Zelda games, and particularly because of like the dungeons, and I feel like there's a lot of kind of that non-linear navigation is a thing I love. Sure. And so every time I kind of, thought about these sort of games, they always really appealed to me. Another thing that appealed to me was that. And so I don't know why it took so long to kind of pull the trigger on it, but I got here,
Very glad you pulled that trigger.
Yes. So let me tell you, this game is actually, you probably caught on to this, but it's actually a sequel to a specific game. It's got a lot of different names and different versions, but it's called Rondo of Blood. And yes. it actually kind of, which is where they actually developed a lot of like assets and stuff, was from that, and they kind of brought them into this. But the story of the game actually begins with the ending of that game, in which Richter Belmont defeats Dracula. I'm guessing you could probably tell that this was a continuation, right?
I mean, yes. From the first couple minutes, I knew that something was going on, and I do remember thinking, like, didn't realize these were, like, chronological stories.
Yeah.
You don't really need... I mean, I didn't play Rondo of Blood to I had no context of the backstory at all, so you don't really need that to enjoy this game. Did it help at all? Where you were like, "Oh shit"?
I didn't,
was there more context?
I didn't play it all the way through, though. There is a nice little package with it and Symphony on the PlayStation. They sell them as a bundle, and then there's also a different version of it, I believe, in that advanced collection. There's, like I said, there's a lot of like versions of that game.
I was looking for the most like true experience, and I did see. So you got like the PS4 collection with both of these on it.
Yeah, I didn't have like the cheesy original, I guess, voice acting. So I did not have that.
I don't blame you because the PS4 you get 2 games for the same cost. I still have my PS3 hooked up, and I did get like the original one with like the very bad voice acting.
That's cool though. I would love to experience that too.
I mean, it's got that like Resident Evil kind of quality to it of just like people are saying words, and there's punctuation on the screen. It's not really conveying any emotion or meaning. It's kind of just like, all right, somebody said some words, cool, and then you keep on going.
Well, okay, regardless, what were your like kind of impressions of like the overall like story of this game?
I mean, there isn't that much of a story, right? Like,
it's pretty
Alucard,
basic,
son of Dracula, He's very handsome. He's pretty sexy. He wears a cape.
Yes.
He goes back to his father's castle. And for some reason, one of the Belmonts is there. And he thinks that something is wrong. Something has taken over his dad's castle. He's trying to figure out what it is. And so then you explore the castle for quite a few hours. You fight a lot of enemies. And then we get to the end, and there are multiple endings.
That's true.
And you
yeah.
learn what's really going on. And then that's kind of it, depending
Yeah.
on what. So there, I guess there are like there's like the bad ending, right? The good ending, the great ending. Which ending did you get? Did you get all of the endings?
I didn't get all of them, no, but I did a pretty full completion, so I feel like I got whatever like the more complete endings was.
Okay. So you did the bad ending where you fight Richter Belmont
Yes.
again.
So I want to kind of set that up. Like you said, the story, it's kind of slight, and you also mentioned earlier that that's kind of these whole games, which is a thing I like, actually, that it's kind of a simple story, and then the game is about exploration, and it kind of just lets you go ham. So like every
I don't really need a lot of like character motivation or deep evolution where somebody has a full change of heart and re-examines their entire lives. I just want to go to all the different squares on the map. Like I just want. Yeah. How do I get to all the squares?
I will say
that's what I'm interested in.
In these parameters, or like even without that, I think the story is good. I think there's as long as it has like a simple and like compelling hook, I think that's good, you know. And like the gameplay is almost the story in a way. The people say that all the time, but I think that's really true here. But the thing with most, you mentioned before, like even the other Castlevania games, even before this one, it's always just like, it was always you're a Belmont, this family of lineage of like vampire killers, and you know, they always find a reason like, Dracula has been revived and you got to go kill him, and you just go through his castle. And
classic Dracula.
Yeah. And so this, to me, was actually kind of interesting because, you know, that was even Rondo of Blood. They always find like a unique reason or twist on it. And the twist here was that actually, you know, the protagonist, the Belmont of Rondo of Blood, as you come to find out, at least in this bad ending we're presenting, or, you know, part of the, not the full picture, is that, you know, he's defeated Dracula once again, but now he is like trying to revive him because, you know, he's a Belmont. He's a vampire hunter, a Dracula hunter, and now he's got nothing to do, basically, you know.
His only reason for existence is to kill Dracula. And so he needs, it's the Ouroboros. He needs Dracula there in order to find fulfillment in life.
And so that creates a fun spin where you're now playing as, granted, Alucard was a playable character in Castlevania 3. You could like switch characters, but now he's like the protagonist of the story. Yeah. So there's some there's honestly, after going back and playing those old games, they do a really good job of tying elements of like every single game into this one. It's really cool, like the level of detail they go. But yeah, Alucard is someone they brought over from Castlevania 3, and now he's the main character, which I think is really cool. So that kind of sets up the bad ending.
Yes.
Which I don't know, like, did you do that one?
So I did do that one. So slightly off topic here for a second. I did do that one because I was trying really hard not to look at any like strategy guides, and I really just kind of wanted to figure out everything for myself.
Yes.
And so I did know something like, okay, at some point the castle flips.
Yep.
And I was like, okay, I know this is happening at some point, but I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to get to that point in the game. So let's just kind of go through the motions. And so I did get that bad ending. And I really did not know what to do. I beat
Oh,
him, and it was
okay,
just
yeah.
like, oh, that's it? I know there's more than that. And so I did have to do a little bit more exploring and get in a few other things. And eventually, I figured it out where I could see. So now we're back to the story here. I could see that the Belmont was actually being controlled
Yes.
by an evil something or other.
Shaft.
Um,
I I
yes,
I had a
yes.
different journey. I kind of want to throw in my kind of way I discovered it. I knew there was like more to it. I didn't know if it was like you beat Richter and then there's more. But the way I kind of figured it out actually was so I feel like I discovered him like kind of early. And I was like, wow, oh my god, okay, yeah, there's got to be more game after this. And I go to try and fight him, and I just got completely destroyed. And I was like,
Oh,
so I didn't know, I just thought like, oh, I just haven't explored enough. So then I ended up exploring more and like finding, like whatever you got to wear this here or whatever. And that's how I like found the thing. So I didn't get to the point where like I because I guess that's the bad ending is like you just defeat him and it's like, oh, you
it's just
defeat.
the end.
Yeah. Um
You can. I watched the full credits like 3 times because I got the bad ending and I was like, oh, maybe something happens after the credits. So then I just watched all of the credits,
that's
which
good.
like congratulations to all the people who worked on this game. You should be very proud. I'm very happy for you. Hopefully, you're doing well in life. I wish you well. But damn, the credits, like, after I watched them the first time, I was like, can I skip? No. And so I fought him once, and then it was credits, and it was just like, all right, that's it. I was like, I know that's not the
Yeah.
end.
Okay, so you went back in there.
Um, so let me ask you this. So the again, I was trying to just like read as little as possible. I really wanted to figure it out. And so okay, I knew I needed something. And up in the top left corner of the map is that hallway that has the spikes on the top and the bottom. I know you know what I'm
Yes.
talking about.
Yes. Oh
Um,
yeah.
did you find that spike breaker armor on your own?
I
Was that something
believe
that you came across
I believe I
without
did. Yeah.
I I got so many because right, that's the whole point of the game is you get something and you're like, oh, maybe this can solve this puzzle. So
Yeah.
I got the ability to be the bat, and I was like, oh yeah, maybe I can fly between them.
I did
Nope,
try
you
that.
get
You
to the
get
door.
completely destroyed.
And, oh
Oh.
my god, it is painful. It is a pratfall. It is a scene in Jackass when you're in that
And I
hall
love the voice
and
acting where it's like, oh.
yes. And you just bounce and bounce and bounce and bounce and bounce, and then you die.
Yeah.
Um, fucking
It's a
sucks.
brutal
And so
game.
you try it as the bat. Okay, that doesn't work. And there's like the closest save spot is so far away. Or then you like go to
That
the
does kind of suck,
complete
yeah.
opposite corner of the map, and like, okay, I got the ability to become the cloud of smoke. Let's try the cloud of smoke because in a few other spots
You
I
are
can sort
describing
of
exactly what I did, yeah.
and so then I went all the way fucking back up there as the cloud of smoke. And I get to the door. I try. Nope, nope. Something happens. And I hit the spikes. And then I just bounce on the spikes until I die again.
So
And it was
you
driving me insane.
you
I
did
spent
look it up here.
so. I eventually I had to figure out what to do because those spikes I feel like are one of the most hidden parts of the game. Like
Hmm.
correct me if I'm wrong. I want to say that it's down in the catacombs, and you have to let that one skeleton with the exploding barrel. You have to let that skeleton get close enough to the wooden gangplank walkway and
Oh, I
throw the
remember
exploding
that,
barrel,
yeah.
and then like that only happens once, and that's one of those things where I was like, damn, this is pretty cool, but also who the hell like figured this out for the first time?
I honestly,
Like,
I honestly figured that out. I don't know.
and that's again, we've established you are the
Well,
gamer.
I did look up
Um,
stuff, but I think it was stuff that like in a more modern game, and I think there I love like these older games because I do like kind of how non-handholdy they are. But one thing I like about kind of modern Metroidvania game, like Hollow Knight, I played after this, and just like, or like it's even present in like more modern Zelda games, is a feature I like is like being able to like mark on the map. Because I do, I like a thing I'll say about like the original Legend of Zelda, because it's kind of like cryptic, but it's like it's actually a lot easier if you like kind of map things out and write it out, which they kind of encourage. But like this is kind of in between, where they give you a really nice detailed map, but so my issue was, okay, I get the double jump, and then I'm looking on the map and I'm like, oh, here are some spots where I know I need to double jump. Or I get the ability to fly, and I'm like, oh, here's some areas where I could fly. But I got that mist thing, which I knew, like, oh, I can go through gates. But, like, I'm looking at the map, and I'm like, where were those again? So I just, like, looked up the locations of those, because I didn't feel...
Oh.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Where it was, like, it's hard to look at that map and tell, like, where the mist gates were.
Which is very fair. There's no indication on the map at any point that says use mist gates here. I would always look for the tiny little opening in each square. Like if it had a connecting square,
that's a good idea.
I would always look for the tiny little emptiness. Like it wasn't if it was a full connected square on the map, that meant that you couldn't go anywhere else. Mm-hmm. But if it had the little opening, that meant there was somewhere I hadn't been. And so, especially at the end, because I did see, to get like the true ultimate best ending, you have to go to every single square, which I ended up not doing.
Okay, I didn't do that either. I was just I was satisfied with the ending I got.
I was satisfied with the ending I got too, and I did look up the difference. Other than saying like I visited every square, and there is the one optional boss. Did you fight the one optional boss?
What was it?
The giant like Sphinx thing.
Oh,
like
yes, I did fight that. It was, what was it? Hard. I kind of threw everything I had at it, but it just like it took a lot of damage.
So you beat it?
I believe so. Yeah. What was it called?
It did not. It kicked my. If you search for Symphony of the Night secret boss, you'll find it.
Okay, maybe it did, but you had a hard time with it.
I got whooped multiple times, and then I was like, you know what? I'm pretty much done with this.
Okay.
I did not beat him, and I did not. So we're talking about Galamoth.
Okay. This is good. This is good stuff right now. Yes. Oh, this is exactly what I was thinking of. Yes. Which I believe back to like what I was saying about like tying stuff in to other games. I think they had like every boss of like every other game in here, and this guy was actually a boss in Kid Dracula, which was like this really like chibi looking like platformer game on, I think, the Famicom or whatever, where you play as like a little chibi Alucard, but they call him Kid Dracula. And he was like one of the bosses in that. And I know because when I beat him, I got a trophy or whatever on PlayStation that was like, there was like a trophy for like each beating all of the bosses that are from a specific game, I believe. So like when I believe I beat like all the bosses that were in like Castlevania 3 and like got a trophy, but I was very like amused that they even had like Kid Dracula in there. Like they had everything.
I did really like all of the boss fights. I thought all of the bosses were really cool looking.
Yes.
And they were like challenging, but not super insanely difficult or anything.
Oh yeah, for sure. It was, and just the amount they had was really cool. So when you were doing when you did the secret or like the extra story, did you like this? I know you. I really liked that part where you go and like kind of witness the death of Dracula's wife, of Alucard's mother, in sort of like a dream world.
Yes.
That was really cool, and that really made, again, like it's just kind of these like little twists on like a kind of classic or like basic story that I really liked. I like that, and like the tragic ending with Dracula in the end, where it was like sort of like it's all for nothing, That
Dracula.
what's that?
Lost my train of thought. Continue whatever you were just saying.
Well, actually, I have some more details about that. Was I believe they were actually inspired by the 1992 adaptation of Bram Stoker's Dracula, which kind of had he had kind of like the sympathetic, heartbreak tied to it, which I also watched last week. So I'm like really researched.
You're in the thick of it right now,
and it's an awesome movie, but we can't talk about that right now.
Do you think I saw some? This is maybe just again a little more context here. I think I saw some recent photos of the main creator of Symphony of the Night, and he looks like someone who would be watching like 90s
totally.
vampire movies in 2021. He looks like like the Devil May Cry guy in real life. A lot of jackets and sunglasses inside, and necklaces and rings, and possibly multiple handguns.
I have some information about this guy a little bit.
Please, yes.
So we talked about how it was, used a lot of elements and assets from Rondo of Blood. It was actually directed by the director of that game, but during production of the game, one of its programmers, who is Koji Igarashi, who is the guy you're talking about, was asked to help finish the game as an assistant director. And he, like you said, he created this game, even though he was originally just a programmer, because I think he is responsible for taking it even more in this direction. I think they were kind of planning that already, but I think he really, made it what it is. At least that's from what I get from it. Because this was
really turned the goth aesthetic up.
Yes, yeah. and I think so also from a game design perspective, because this was meant to originally be like a spin-off from the series, like you're not playing as a Belmont, and I think that gave them a little bit more license to kind of be creative,
Sure.
Like you said, they're more action platformer, a linear storyline, and this added in, non-linearity, RPG elements, but, and it's also, people often say when they think of Metroidvania, they think he was specifically influenced by Super Metroid, but he actually also attributes being influenced by A Link to the Past, and like the way its world works of like, okay, I got this item in this dungeon, and now I can use that to unlock parts of the world and progress. So that's always a thing that's appealed to me, is because that's an element I love about A Link to the Past, which is someday we'll probably do that.
Absolutely will.
But yeah,
let me ask you this really
he's
quick.
fully, like, I feel like he's really the guy. But yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Let me ask you this really quick. So he is maybe not a good example because you said he was a programmer and then he went on to be credited as the creator of the game. But do most video game creators know how to code? Does Shigeru Miyamoto know coding and can program a video game?
Yes.
Or do they just say I have ideas, make this happen?
I mean, it's different for everyone, obviously. But Miyamoto, I believe he was originally I believe he originally worked on the art of cabinets, and then one day we'll cover Donkey Kong, but the story was I believe he was a programmer then eventually, and they had all these extra cabinets of a game that didn't sell well, and they were like, here, reprogram this, make your own game, and he made Donkey Kong. So yeah, a lot of those people are, they are also, know the programming and, understand game design for sure.
Okay. This guy wasn't just hey, what's cool? Vampires in trench coats. Can you give him a double jump? What if we give the bats sonar and echolocation attacks? And then he made other people do that. He could realistically have programmed a good portion of this himself.
He was already working on it heavily. Yeah, for sure.
Sure. Okay. Gotcha. Because it's just when you see So I watch a lot of like the Gaming Historian. I don't know if you're familiar with the Gaming
Oh
Historian.
yeah, yeah.
Learned a lot. But when they talk about like people inventing video games, it's always just like this person had an idea. It's never like, oh, they went to coding school in 1988, which
Mm,
really nobody did.
right,
They never
yeah.
talk about that aspect of it. Like, they learned C sharp? Did they like code on DOS? What are we talking about here?
Like yeah,
I
like
don't know if you
it's
know anything about coding. It is hard.
no, yeah, I don't. No. And like I said, I know it's different for everyone and it's also like it used to be like we knew a lot less about who was working on these things because they didn't credit people who worked on the games. So
True, 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 true.
until later on, like by this time, they had full credits and everything. But like early games, no. We already talked about so the non-linearity, the exploration, was something he brought, and it's kind of what this whole kind of genre is now known for. I don't know if is there anything else like you wanted to really touch up upon in terms of like exploring this. I mean, it's a perfect setting for it too. It's like this big castle,
So
Dracula's
can
castle.
we talk about along with the exploration and just like being interested to go into these different parts of the castle, the music works so well. The music is so cool. I love
Yes.
every theme in the entire game, probably. It works really well.
Yes. So the music, I want to credit all these people, was composed by Michiru Yamane, who I think that was I believe they had like in-house composers and bands at Konami, and she was, I don't know if with the thing you got, did it come with like kind of the artwork, that the concept art that came along with the game?
I don't think so. I think this was very much just like here's the PS1 version of the
Okay.
game, the end.
Well, if you got a second, go over to Google and type in Ayami Kojima Castlevania or whatever, or Symphony of the Night concept artwork, because the Ayami Kojima, who I mentioned, was the character designer for the game, and pretty much you mentioned it to the guy, you attributed it to the guy, the director, but Kojima actually kind of defined what we kind of consider the aesthetic of
Aesthetic, yeah.
yeah, like I forgot kind of what this style is referred to, but it's very cool. It looks kind of like a classical almost painting, but it's also like kind of edgy and video gamey, you know what I mean? It's set the tone going forward, where I feel like previous Castlevanias didn't have this. But
This
yep.
is very stylized. I'm looking at these photos, and there's just here's Alucard, cape blown in the wind,
Sexy, like you
plume
mentioned.
of bats. He's very sexy.
I think like the term I looked up, there was some like Japanese term of like feminine man or something like that, like this very like
Okay.
soft look,
He does have a soft look, but you also know that he could slay.
he'll fuck you up. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Multiple swords.
So yeah, I believe Yamane was one of the house composers for Konami and took, a lot of the inspiration from like this artwork and I think really matched it with the game and like the different, we mentioned, you tied it to the exploration, but like these radically different areas that have totally different vibes. And the music, yeah, it still sounds so cool. I think like I love like this era of music. Like they were kind of on like, they had like, it was like a cutting edge time for like what you could do with like console music, and I believe they took like full advantage of like if you go into it, like if you look up more specific histories of like the production of this game, people really go into like all the technical aspects of like the programming and the music, and there's a lot of like fascinating stuff of like how this was composed. But yeah, like even that sets kind of the tone, and then they also had like old tunes that they kind of brought forward, but it sounds really cool and really diverse.
Agreed. There are like legitimately multiple different genres of music.
Yes.
And like so much wild instrumentation. There's a really cool like jaunty piano thing, and then at some point in the inverse castle dungeon, there's just like some like weird grind music, like some weird death metal kind
Yeah, they're
of.
straight up like
Uh,
thrash songs in there.
yes, yes.
Then there's like I feel like
Um,
jazz and like jazz fusion in there, which is so
Definitely
sick.
some jazz parts. And there's like the more like standard video game levels too, but even
Yes,
those are like done so well with like so orchestrally.
there's like like a Dracula's Castle theme, I believe it's called, and um like the early portions of this game. There's a lot of I mentioned like the bosses, but there's a lot of areas that are just like here's this classic area where like screen for screen looks the same as old games, but they have like those classic themes in there where it's just like it sounds like a song where you're running from left to right, you know what I mean, with just like a pumping beat. But like yeah, with like this whole new kind of like I guess like rock take on it. I wouldn't even say rock, but it's just like it's got this full like drum sound that sounds so sweet with like the synths and everything. It's just like you wouldn't describe it as anything but like a video game genre song, you know?
This is making me want to play the old games, just to like appreciate those like nuances and nods. Because like you mentioned, The Legend of Zelda does a really nice job of like here's this theme song, and it's in almost every game. Final Fantasy does that. Like here's the Final Fantasy theme, and
Mm-hmm.
you're just like, oh shit, that's that fucking song I know. And now I'm thinking like, oh, maybe I should go and play these other Castlevania games just to like really appreciate this game even more.
I really feel like you'll do that. Like it would happen, and they've got all those collections now where you can really get a lot of them out there. Like they're really accessible. But yeah, like you
Yeah.
really feel like this has all the classics, but then like this new aesthetic of like that artwork or like the thrash metal or like even just like I don't know, even with like the enemies, because like I feel like a lot more in the classic Castlevanias, it feels more like like it shows through like the bosses, which all come back obviously, but like it'd be like you're fighting a giant bat, you're fighting like a Frankenstein, you're a Medusa. It felt very like Halloween. And then I think this along with like that harder cutting edge like brings in like they really like I think almost every enemy if you look them up they're like based on some like mythic figure and they really have like a wide like roster of different like folklore creatures and it really gets
Oh.
like yeah like all of them I looked up most of them to be like this is like a Celtic folklore and like this is from this and like it's like different like religions and all this stuff and I feel like they just like canonize almost all of it like regardless of whether it fits under one like actual religious canon and I think that's really cool but like I feel like it also gets a little bit like harder and edgier and there's like there's like creatures that I feel like give me like cosmic horror vibes almost too.
Definitely some of those. There was later in the game, or even like man, at some point there's some hallway in the game where there are these like weird plant people that spit fire. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, yeah.
In that really long hallway, and that had like Little Shop of Horrors kind of
Oh
vibes to
sure,
it.
yeah. Yeah,
I was
totally.
actually okay. I pulled up a list here of enemies.
Hmm.
Do you have a favorite or least favorite enemy? I 1000% have a least favorite enemy, and I fucking
What's
hate
the
these
least
things so
favorite?
much. Let me find the name. I want to make sure. The Flea Man. I hate the Flea
Oh,
Man.
okay.
He's so little and he's so fast and he's so. I would love to know what sort of mythology the Flea Man comes from. Because he's such a pain in the ass.
I feel like the design he had, so like I think I could be wrong. I'm not an expert, but there's in either 1 or 3 there's a Frankenstein boss and they have like a little guy who's just like looks just like him with him
Okay.
but I believe they call him like Igor in that so
Oh,
it's like
okay. Okay.
Frankenstein and Igor but like then eventually they get changed into like Flea Man. I could be wrong but okay, those are kind of annoying. I think you eventually get used to them and like how to kill them.
Fucking hate those things. What was your least favorite enemy?
Oh God, I don't remember. I feel like they weren't awful, but I started to not like the guys who just like run across the screen and like leave little fire all over the place.
Oh yeah,
It
yeah,
just kind of
yeah.
like
I
gets in
hated
the
those
way.
things too.
I liked most of the enemies. I think my favorite, like of just the common enemies, just because it was so awesome, was there'd be those like zombie night guys that you'd kill and like they'd scream and like blood would
Make
come
that
pouring
terrible
out of them.
noise. Yeah, they would
That was so
immediately.
sick.
I think they're just called bloody zombies.
Yeah,
and they
that's
would make that
badass.
terrible screech. I really liked the huge glowing skull that floated in the air, like the Skull Lord, like the
that
giant skull.
looked
You know
like
what I'm talking
Steve
about?
Austin t-shirt.
Yes,
Yeah,
it
those
did
were
look like the Stone Cold Steve Austin T-shirts.
yeah, those were kick ass. Yeah. How about how about the bosses? Like we already mentioned, like there's an insane roster. Did you have like standout ones?
I'm trying to think. I thought that Death looked really cool. I don't remember
Death was tight.
Death being like super challenging or anything. But I just thought Death looked cool. I liked when you fight like the Shadow version of yourself, right? You fight Shadow.
Yes,
Shadow Alucard at some points.
I believe it's
Yeah.
called. That was like that's not like the first boss I encountered, but it is one of the early ones, and that was like a very cool set piece that stuck out to me. Where I was like, "Damn!" And that had a cool. That's where like I really felt like I like the combat a lot. You know, where it's like challenging, but you can kind of learn it and get better at it. You know, that was a really fun boss to fight.
Do you ever use the shield? Were you blocking much?
So, we can talk about that for sure. Actually, that's the other thing that I wanted to mention that returned in this game. You mentioned earlier, Castlevania 2, Simon's Quest, and that was kind of experimental in that that was an RPG kind of game with mechanics, and they brought those back here, where like in the previous games, it was just you can get like whip upgrades in a level, but otherwise, you know, you're the same kind of guy moving through, you know, with minor upgrades. This brought in, you know, full RPG, you know, leveling up, different spells, different weapons and items. And I thought that was really cool. And my original go-to was I would have a shield and a sword, and that was really satisfying to kind of be defensive and like get aggressive. And then it does have a thing where you eventually get a little bit more powerful, and I think the game becomes a little bit easier. I think like the classic Vanias fans often accuse like these kind of games as being like too easy. But I still think there was a moderate challenge. But yeah, that was my original. But I actually eventually did away with the shield when there's like a sword that like you kind of like magically throw around. And so like you throw the sword as like a projectile and it comes back to you. And so what I was doing was I was throwing the sword, and then I had a sword in my other hand, and while it was like flying out, I would attack with the other sword. So I was pure offense. I don't know about you. What was your
attack.
Yeah, all attack.
I played with it for a while. For some reason, for some reason I had it in my mind that the demon familiar was going to be so much more powerful than like the sword one.
No, the sword wasn't even a familiar. It was an equipable. There is a sword familiar, but there's like a magical sword item that you can equip that you throw it and it like flies around like it's like magic almost, and it comes back. So I might have
missed this. I thought you were just not using the term familiar, because that you don't really throw that. It's there.
Yeah.
I must have completely missed.
Oh no, yeah.
This other sword. Damn.
It was so satisfying to throw, and like eventually when you get stronger, it by the end it wasn't like the most powerful weapon I had. I got a little bit better ones, but I still appreciated like the range of it, you know. So I had the sword, and then I had the demon familiar, which was fun. I also liked having the familiars, like there's little guys following you around, and he'd be like,
that's fun. That's fun.
Did you keep that on at all? I don't see why you would turn it off, you know?
I did. It was a little frustrating. Sometimes it was just like, I don't really know what this is doing. It wasn't always like kicking the ass, you know? But once I got him, I kept him on the whole time. So I had both the bat and the demon up to like level 20, I think.
Oh,
So they
nice.
were on there the whole time. Once I got them.
Yeah, they were fun to have around. Yeah, overall I liked kind of like having the only downside, it like it's kind of a stupid complaint, but I you get all these equipable things, but I wish you could see them on your character. Like, I was like, oh, I equipped this piece of gear, but like I just look the same, and I'm like, that's no fun.
So I did see a video where some of those things, like the boots you get that make you a little taller, that is a
Yeah.
real thing.
Yep,
And
I
I think
did
like
get
the
those.
sunglasses, I got those boots too. The sunglasses that make you look cool, I think like change color from your regular like
Great
eye
descriptions
effects
too.
in the game.
The description was like,
So
"This makes you discreetly taller" or something. Yeah.
I did watch a video that was like, oh, this is literally like 1 pixel taller. Like it was like mapped out by the pixel height. And
Wow.
I was like, wow, that is that's fun. We're having fun with this.
Okay. Yeah, that is pretty fun. Did you get involved with much of the spells?
I tried the spells. I could never. You're talking about like they were basically like the Street Fighter inputs.
There was
Like they're
that,
like the
and
fighting
then
game inputs.
there was those, which is what I was talking about, and I guess there's also like your different abilities that kind of all the things that like consume magic, I guess.
Oh, I mean, I especially at the end of the game, I was the bat a lot.
Yeah, you
I
have to in the upside down castle, I feel like.
I also liked being the wolf a lot, and just like especially if there's like a long
Mm.
stretch where you could just run, you could just sprint from one side to the other. I like doing that. Other than that, I did the smoke. Who cares? And there was one more, right? Something else you could turn into, or was it just those?
I don't remember. I think those are the major ones though. Like when you were a bat, you eventually got like upgrades where you could like have the sonar or like shoot a fireball or whatever, but I didn't do much of
And
those.
fireball's clunky, the sonar,
Yeah, yeah.
whatever.
It was more
Um,
utilitarian, I think, being the bat and the wolf.
yes, agreed.
Um but I don't know about you. I didn't really do the combo moves either.
Oh, occasionally, I would do one on accident, and I'd be like, "Oh shit, what just happened?" But when
Yeah.
I tried to do them on purpose, it was really hard. I don't know if it's like my PlayStation 3 controller is just old, but I was having a really hard time with it. It just like those were not working for me very easily.
I think that was more of like a like that was there, but it like other games inspired by this and like other Igarashi games themselves too seem like they have tried to incorporate magic in other ways going forward, because I don't think this was necessarily like you just don't I don't know, it's not really a game where you like want to memorize combos, you know.
Yes, that's like Final Fantasy 6. Oh, what's his name? The fighting guy who has the his like special is basically you input fighting game commands. He's got the flat top. His brother's the king. You know what I'm talking
Oh,
about,
Guile. Yeah.
right?
Colonel Guile. Yeah.
Characters. Oh no. Terra. Sabin, that's his name. Sabin.
Okay, the other guy at the flat top.
Power bombs the train.
Okay.
We're gonna have to put Final Fantasy VI on the list of games we play for this.
Yeah, of course, of course. That's considered a classic for sure.
Ever played it?
No, no. We'll talk about that though in the next episode. we'll get to that. I wanted to before we went over the bosses, but I wanted to throw out. For me, I think the most memorable boss was the one that's like the mass of bodies. Do you remember
Okay.
that?
So I was forgetting, because sometimes it's like, hey, very clear this is a boss, but they're not always necessarily like punctuated by story points, right? So I was
No,
forgetting
no.
some. So The boss that is just like an orb of human bodies,
Yeah.
very cool.
That's yeah,
Grand Falloon.
yes. It wasn't really hard, but it was so that's, back to like the vibe they brought with this was like we're getting edgy, and I loved it. Overall the tone of this game is awesome, I think. I love like kind of that, like it's edgy, it's silly, you know what I mean, but it's also like it takes itself seriously at the same time. I don't know. That's my sort of vibe. So that boss really kind of encapsulated that for me, I guess.
Yes, I would agree with that. I liked Beelzebub as well. That was like another boss that's like, oh, this is like kind of shocking and gross, but also like, hey, we're kind of having fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
guess you could
horrific monsters. Sorry, go ahead.
just say maybe a product of like the 90s of just like, we're freaking people out. But
Yeah.
to your point, it also has like the historical context or the religious context, or like it's not just like we're putting this gross fly guy in here just cause.
Yeah, no, it's cool. And I like how they go there. It's cool to me. Another small one I want to shout out is there's like a boss where you fight like these evil versions of the other playable characters of Castlevania 3. There's one where you fight like evil Trevor, Sypha, and Grant, and
Yes.
that's just really cool. Like they got everything in this game, even the main characters of another game.
See, again, I was appreciating this game, but I can't help but wonder, would I have appreciated it more if I had all these other context clues?
Well, I hope, you're even more so appreciating it.
I am right now.
And we talked about the like concept art and like that sort of stuff, but this ties along with the bosses really well, and we talked about the vibe, but like I really like just like from a more technical perspective the way it mixed in like 3D and 2D, and it really was cool how they did that. It was like, especially in this era where it was like everything we had to start making 3D games, and like instead I feel like along with the music, like they kind of took advantage of all the like technical things they had access to make just like a really cool game, and they didn't like force it to be a 3D game or anything like that.
I do see that as like one of the primary talking points about this game is that like, hey, everything else at this time was 3D and sort of open world in a different way, and the people who made this game were just like, nope, we're not doing that. Like we're gonna take some of that idea, but we're gonna keep this very much a 2D game. And right, the reason we're talking about this game today instead of like Bubsy the Bobcat or whatever is because like, oh, they made the right move, and this like still holds up so well. This still looks really cool.
I think
as opposed to,
I think there are things people would look at and like idiots would look at and go like, oh, this looks old. Like, like it is kind of jarring, but in a cool way of like you're in a room, but then there's like this crazy 3D stuff happening, and like the way the elements mix, they kind of like clash, but to me it like creates a really cool aesthetic, I think.
You're in the library and those books come out at you, and they're chasing you. That's cool. I do think, and this might be a topic for a little bit down the road, I think part of the reason that you and I like this game so much, and I'm assuming a lot of the people who like this game are roughly our age or older, is because it does have that like everything about this game is nostalgic, even though I never played it before. Like when I think about old games, I'm like, oh yeah, they look like this. Even though a lot of the old games that I'm thinking of don't necessarily look like this, I'm just like, yep, this like scratches that itch perfectly of nostalgia of what I remember video games being when I was a kid. Again, even though I never played this before.
Yes, I feel I mentioned it to you over text, but I almost have like a boomer brain about like video games and movies a little bit, and in the soul, like, now that there's like, it's so easy to do things that were not easy to do before, but like the trade-off, I feel like a lot of times is there's plenty of an amazing films and video games now that blow me away. But I think the more average case is like you don't see the craft on screen as much. I just don't think, you know what I mean?
So you think with this, you're seeing more of the craft of video games?
You see the craft. You see, so actually, one research thing I researched talked about how this is kind of sad, but this was actually the last hurrah for a lot of the like best like 2D like sprite artists in video games. And I think you see that. I think it's pretty beautiful what they do. And that's kind of sad because things went a different way. But this was also a launch pad for people who would go on to have great careers in like 3D animation. And sometimes I feel like the difficulty of doing these things, I don't know, I just think it's a lot easier to see like the work that went into it. I have another comparison point, actually. It's kind of off topic, but there's this old movie called Forbidden Planet, a sci-fi movie from the 50s, I believe, starring Leslie Nielsen. And there's a monster in this that it's mostly invisible, but there are times where it does appear, and the way that they convey it is like it's sort of like they're like hitting it with lasers, and it's kind of like coming into, like, you can kind of see it, but like what the way it's that they have it on screen is that it's actually like an animation that they do over top, like it's like literally just animation over top of the live action footage they showed, and it looks amazing, I think. And of course you can tell what it is, like it's like you can see the strings. I'm bringing another metaphor in, but you can see the strings. But yeah, I don't know. There's something about that I feel like I can see the craft. It's to me, it's the same thing as like watching a movie now that's like no one did anything and it's kind of done on a computer, compared to watching a movie where they filmed someone performing something. You know what I mean? So that's my kind of it's kind of all these loose things that all connect, but I like being able to tell that like someone put some heart and soul into it a little bit, which it certainly happens now, but I feel like it's a lot easier for that to not happen, if that makes sense.
I would agree. I think there's something to be said for like a passion coming through as just opposed to like, oh, we know that this is like what things should look like, and so we're going to kind of do them based totally, off of like what the market demands or whatever. I was going to say, on the topic of passion, something that this game reminded me of, and then I utilized in the plane of this game, was game FAQs. Did you use game FAQs at all?
For this, I think to look up those gates, but like, yeah, I used that a lot back when I was a kid. That's the nostalgia, yeah.
Yes, something I hadn't thought about in a really long time was game FAQs, and I do think there's something to be said for like even the passion and the hard work. This might be a little bit of a stretch if we're talking about passion, but the ability to like write all of that information down and think like, I'm going to put this on the internet in 2001 or whatever.
You open it up and like through like text, they've made like the logo of the game.
Yes, I was just about to say, what is that? ASCII? ASC2?
Something like that, yeah.
Never knew how to pronounce that word, but that, do you know how to pronounce that word? That like to make the logo of the game as it appears when you turn on the Super Nintendo, making that as like the cover of your game FAQs page. Get the fuck out of here. That is how you know it is high quality. Like, someone put their blood, sweat, and tears into that guide, because those guides have appendixes and updates and edits. And
it fucking sucks now. If you here's the boomer brain again, but like you go to IGN or like you go to if you're going to like a like any wiki that's on fandom, which is like all of them now, and like a million ads pop up, and you're like, "Fuck, how do I close this?" And you're like, it's like it sucks so much now. I just miss it opening up a game FAQ.
Game FAQs is still there. Those things are still preserved. I can remember, and I did it while I was playing Symphony of the Night. I looked for like the best rated guides, and then you'd look to see if there were like, oh, here's a guide that's just for cheats or a guide that's just for secrets. Did you ever try and print off a page from game FAQs, like a game guide?
Oh yeah.
They're huge. They're fucking gigantic. In the nightstand drawer of my parents' guest room, where I stay when I visit, there is a 3-ring binder that is full of pages I printed off of game FAQs for Harvest Moon 64. I printed off like dozens and dozens of guides, and then I would 3-ring bind them together, because I didn't even have like consistent internet in 2000. I would just like, all right, I'm going to print these off, and then I'm just going to go through it.
That's beautiful.
If you were lucky enough to keep the page up, you could like search for a keyword. Otherwise, you really had to just like skim through each section, each chapter, each level. And whoever wrote those spent a lot of time writing them. Like, I hope those people do that as a career now, because that had to take so much time.
Yeah, I'm sure some of them. Well, you see, I've seen where some of those people have ended up, and yeah, I think that's cool. That could have been a launch pad of its own.
Or at the very least, right? There has to have been like the first person. So I looked it up. The skeleton ape or ape skeleton, the enemy that throws that barrel that explodes the gangplank.
Yeah.
Right. If you didn't use Nintendo Power, and you didn't use game FAQs, there had to have been someone, or maybe there wasn't a game FAQs yet. There had to have been someone who figured that out for the first time. That's one of my favorite things to think about, is someone who like discovered this thing for the first time, and like,
be how the coolest person at school.
How do you figure these things out? Yeah.
People had a lot more patience back then, you know? And I do think there's things, there's certain things about old game design, tying it back to the design that like don't hold up in certain old games. But I also think there's a lot of things that I miss and appreciate about these older style games that I think you see come back in a lot of games inspired by it. So I'm glad to have seen kind of a resurgence of games that kind of ask a little bit more of you, you know?
I mean, I was going to say there's a whole like demographic of video game people just like us, roughly our age, that like the same things that we like. And you do see so much of like that in popular indie games now, whether it's like gameplay or aesthetics or music or graphics. There's definitely a lot of people who are on the same page and just like, yep, I just like video games from this time period. Even the Devil May Cry guy, I'm sorry, what is his name again?
Igarashi? Koji
Igarashi. Koji Igarashi made a game, right? Didn't he just put out a game that's just basically new version of Symphony?
Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, yeah. And that also had Yamane doing the soundtrack, and so that game actually feels a lot. I played a little bit of it. It does feel a lot like Symphony of the Night. It feels really good. Again, it tried to do something different with the magic, but yeah, it's in a lot of ways it's sort of derivative, but I sort of get it too, of just like, this is his first game away, like he's just gonna make the thing he makes, you know. I think that's cool, but I am curious. I would be curious to see him making, you know, something that's a little bit more like, you know, more like a new direction or something, you know, but keep a lot of like his game design philosophy, you know.
I haven't played it. I can't say if it's good or bad. I'm just saying, even the man who made this game in 1997 or helped make this game, is like, yeah, you know what I want to do 20 years later? I want to do something like this. I want to kind of do this exact
Yes.
game again.
Yeah, and we definitely mentioned a lot of the games that have carried on that legacy, Hollow Knight, stuff like that. Yeah. We'll talk about we've already basically hit on kind of the legacy of this game. It was critically acclaimed. Eventually it was a sales hit, and at this point, yeah, along with Metroid, it defined like a whole genre of games, which is kind of cool because it was at first just like looked at as like a experimental spin-off, and I think that has a lot to do with why it's so memorable and so stuck around, because it was like, instead of, not to take away anything from the other Castlevania games, but like, actually I think Super Castlevania that you mentioned, and there was another one at that time, that they were just retellings of Castlevania 1. And so, even though there's a lot of fans of those games and they're perfectly fine, like, this was a cool breakaway into like doing something new. And to me, it has the mark of like what I think makes like kind of a great work of art, is like all these elements we've talked about really work in tandem with each other. Like, you can't really talk about one thing without the other. And I think a lot of times when people analyze video games as an art form, they really just focus on the story, and they kind of leave out the element that like it's a video game and you play it, and I don't know. I just think everything in this game, it's a really whole piece of work, I guess.
It's a perfectly balanced soup or stew.
Yeah, it's a good
everything
stew.
is just like blended together so well, and you just want to get maybe like a bisque, because it's all blended together and every bite has all of the flavors in. Let's go with the bisque. It's a good bisque. It's really delicious.
Well, okay. I feel like we covered pretty much everything. Do you have anything else you wanted to get out of the way about this game? Anything you wanted to say?
Really quick. What was your go-to accessory weapon?
Oh, of course we didn't mention that. That's a classic that's been since the first Castlevania game. It's kind of weird, but you get, a secondary weapon that you hit up an attack to use, and it uses hearts. And my go-to was the book that flies around.
Yes, I think that was the Christian Bible.
Fuck yeah.
That was also mine. That's the best one. I'm trying to. Sometimes I would use the stopwatch. I think before I found
that was crucial
Bible,
in some rooms. Yeah,
I used the stopwatch. I didn't like the knife that much, or the diamonds. I never used the like full screen cross very often.
That one used a lot of magic or a lot of hearts.
Yes. I did not like, so like if you discover a new secondary weapon and you just walk over it, you automatically get it. Did not like that mechanic.
Well, let me tell you, in previous games, you would get it and the old one would just be gone.
Oh,
so you might appreciate this more, that you actually have an option to go, oh no, I want that one. Sometimes it flies away or something, but typically you kind of could always have the one you want on.
Yes. Okay,
I'm really glad you mentioned that.
I do like that more than what you're describing.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up, because how could we talk about Castlevania without that?
I mean, I'm trying to find a list of all of these. I didn't use like a lot of the bombs and the shurikens and that sort of stuff.
That's where if I hit a boss like that big guy we talked about, I just unloaded, just used everything I had on him.
Okay, sure.
That's kind of how this game is kind of easy, because you just find a lot of that stuff. You can buy them. And, so you can get better at a lot of the bosses, but if you want, you can just be like, fuck you, and blow them up.
Maybe I should have used more of those. I did like the meal ticket. I thought that was like a fun little kind of play
Yes.
on like the instead of just finding a random ham or whatever.
Yeah, well, okay,
That's
another
fun.
classic Castlevania thing. There's a wall you can break in this. There's a lot of wall meat, but that's a classic in the original ones. You wanted to know the spots where you could break the wall and find meat because you needed all the health you could get. But this one, there's one particular spot that was always like memorable to me as a kid as having that wall meat. And then I go there in this one and it's there and I'm like, that's the same wall.
Same wall meat all these years later.
Yep. Well, yeah,
Okay,
I think we pretty much covered it all, right?
yeah, yeah. I mean, I had a great time. Again, I just like from okay, really quick. From the moment I picked up this game, I had like again that nostalgia for something I never experienced before. And I was like in my mind, I was like, oh yeah, you would get this from the video rental store. It would be so exciting. I love me a good video rental store.
You could beat
Did
this
you
in
see
a
the?
weekend, which I think
Yeah,
is
yeah.
another thing that needs to come back in games.
Um, did you see the death screen very often?
Yeah, totally.
So, I was convinced. Let me see if I can find it here really quick because I wanna make sure I quote it right. It's got that like weird thing in the sand, like the skeleton in the desert,
Yeah.
or I guess the castle's in the distance. But okay. So it says, "Let us go out this evening for pleasure. The night is still young."
Yeah.
Every time I saw this game over screen, I was interpreting this as some sort of like wink and a nudge, like,
Touch
"Hey,
grass.
you're a nerd. Uh, get off the couch. You could still do so much more with your day than play this game." Meanwhile, it's like 1 in the afternoon on Saturday in August, and I'm just like, nope, I'm gonna keep playing Castlevania.
No, yeah.
But
Every time I died, I was like, no, fuck you. I'm going to beat this.
that's what they had to have been implying with that, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's a sweet quote. Castlevania has a lot of sweet, memorable quotes. We didn't talk about what is a man, but even other games have like one that always sticks out to me is Castlevania 2. There's like what is it like? What a terrible night for a curse or something. There's just a lot of cool, yeah, little quotes that would make good like song titles or something.
I'm
This was
saying
one of
this one
them.
specifically.
It feels
What's that
mean.
expression? Has to be taking the piss. This
Oh,
one
sure.
specifically has to be like to your point, like, hey, go touch grass. Like, I read it that way every time.
I could
Uh,
also interpret it as like try again.
sure, I could see that too, because you're a vampire and you kill for pleasure. Um, okay, I was just really seeing this every single time. I was like, wow, this is kind of like a mean-spirited game. And then the more I
No,
know about
it's got a lot of
the
heart.
Devil May Cry guy, like that guy is like, yeah, he
He's
makes video games for a living, but he seems like he would maybe make fun of people for being nerds. Um,
no, I think he loves the fans. I think.
maybe I'm way off base here.
Why don't well, that's good, right? So why don't you how about you tell us what we're doing next?
So next, whenever the next one of these comes out,
Because this is gonna take a
we're going
while
to
to
be
play.
it's going to take a while to play. But whenever the next one of these comes out, we're going to be talking about Final Fantasy VII.
Yes, another PlayStation game. We'll probably do a lot of PlayStation games, but I know you've played this before, right? So we'll have you have some familiarity. I have a history with it too, but we'll get into it more next time. But I have been playing it, so I'm pretty excited to talk more about that one.
The next episode of
Video games, the podcast. Yes.
exactly.
So we're letting you know, so you have time to play along. You didn't have time for this one, but it takes. We should have said this at the beginning. That the game's like 10 hours, so you could beat it quickly. But Final Fantasy VII, it's probably like what? It's probably like a 30-hour game.
35 hours probably. The
Okay.
one thing I will say, again, I spend a lot of time with these video games now. I want to at the very least for myself have some like, oh yeah, look how much time I invested into this. But when you die in Castlevania, it goes back to the your most recent save spot. So I feel like it doesn't really accurately capture how many hours I really spent on this.
Oh, that's fair. That's totally true.
I think it said I beat the game in 8 hours, and I know I played way more than 8 hours.
I saw the death screen more than a few times. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, yeah.
So,
this was a lot of fun, I think. So I'm pretty excited to get to the next one.
thanks for having me, Goo. I'm excited to see what you learn about Final Fantasy VII. I'm excited to wax poetic, and I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, and thanks to everyone for listening to Video Games, the podcast.